Well, this is a common criticism, the idea that the atheist is guilty of a literalist reading of Scripture, no better than the reading of fundamentalists. And it's a very naive way of approaching religion, and there's a far more sophisticated and nuanced view of religion on offer, and the atheist is disregarding that. A few problems with this. First is, anyone making that argument is failing to acknowledge just how many people really do approach these texts literally or functionally. I mean, whether they're selective literalists or literal all the way down the line, there are certain passages in Scripture that just cannot be read figuratively, and people really do live by the lights of what is literally laid out in these books. So, the Quran says hate the infidel, and Muslims hate the infidel because the Quran spells it out ad nauseum. Now, it's true that you can cherry pick Scripture, and you can look for all the good parts. You can ignore where it says in Leviticus that if a woman is not a virgin on her wedding night, you're supposed to stone her to death on her father's doorstep. You can ignore that, and now, to my knowledge, all Jews and Christians do ignore that. In fact, that's not true. There's some Christians who actually do, Reconstructionist Christians, Dominionist Christians in the U.S. who will say, yeah, no, I think the penalty for adultery should be death. I mean, so there are people who have the courage of their convictions there. But most religious people ignore those passages, which really can only be read literally, and say that, they were only appropriate for the time, and they don't apply now. And likewise, Muslims try to have the same reading of passages that advocate holy war. They say, well, these were appropriate to those battles that Muhammad was fighting, but now we don't have to fight those battles. This is all a good thing, but we should recognize what's happening here. People are feeling pressure from a host of all too human concerns that have nothing in principle to do with God. I mean, secularism and human rights and democracy and scientific progress, these have made certain passages in Scripture untenable. Okay? So this is coming from outside religion. And religion is now making a great show of its sophistication in kind of grappling with these pressures. But once again, this is an example of religion losing the argument with modernity. It's an example of the recent shooting at Virginia Tech. The mother of the shooter recognized that there was something wrong with her son. He's suffering from some kind of mental problem. In the context of her rather doctrinaire Christianity, she did not take him to a psychiatrist. She took him from church to church in search of exorcism. She actually found a church that performed an exorcism. So just picture this. There's some, we have an atrocity in the making. We have a dangerously mentally ill college student. We have a concerned mother whose worldview about mental health is trimmed down through the keyhole of a kind of medieval Christianity. And we have a church willing to put forward its expertise in the performance of an exorcism. It would be a lot better if everyone involved had a 21st century view of mental health. No one is moderate people, moderate Christians and Jews and Muslims have to look at this situation and say, well, there's something wrong here. It'd be better to go to a psychiatrist. But the problem is you can't show what's wrong in terms of Scripture. You can't show what's wrong in terms of religion, because in terms of religion, the mother was right. I mean, there are demons, and Jesus cast them out. Demonic possession is actually a problem. The only reason why we don't take it seriously is because we have a wider view of the universe. The universe, that view of the universe did not come to us from religion, it came from science. Let's just grant the possibility that there is a creator God who's omniscient, who occasionally authors books. And he's going to give us a book, the most useful book. He's a loving God, he's a compassionate God, and he's going to give us a guide to life. He's got a scribe. The scribe's going to write it down. What's going to be in that book? I mean, just think of how good a book would be if it were authored by an omniscient deity. I mean, there is not a single line in the Bible or the Quran that could not have been authored by a first century person. I mean, there's not one reference to anything. There are pages and pages about how to sacrifice animals and keep slaves and who to kill and why. There's nothing about electricity. There's nothing about DNA. There's nothing about infectious disease, the principles of infectious disease. There's nothing particularly useful, and there's a lot of Iron Age barbarism in there and superstition. This is not a candidate book. I mean, I can go into to any Barnes and Noble blindfolded and pull a book off a shelf which is going to have more relevance, more wisdom for the 21st century than the Bible or the Quran. I mean, it's really not an exaggeration. Every one of our specific sciences has superseded and surpassed the wisdom of Scripture. From cosmology to psychology to economics, we know more about ourselves than anyone writing the Bible or the Quran did, and that is a distinctly inconvenient fact for anyone wanting to believe that this book was dictated by the Creator of the universe.